So hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So these are the 6 back exercises that I think you should be doing. Quite often we find ourselves only working on the stuff that we can see in the mirror, but there's a whole load of muscles on our back that we need to be targeting. So let's get into it. Before we get into it, make sure you drop a like below, and if you're new, subscribe. The first exercise that we've got up is the chest supported row. So before we go anywhere, obviously we need to look at how we set up the equipment. So as you can see, the bench is set at around a 45-degree angle. We have got 2 solid points of contact with my feet, and my chest is nicely pressed up against the bench. Next step, we need to pick up the dumbbells and have them in a straight line down. The step after that is to pull our shoulders back and then pull through towards your hips. Quite a lot of people end up pulling up into here, and that is just going to bring in too much bicep. We want to be isolating our back muscles, so we are going to pull in to our hips. There is a slight bit of chest coming off the bench, but that is okay. That's mainly to do with me being too tall for the bench. But yeah, as you can see, the elbows going straight in towards the hips, nice and controlled on the way up and down, so the eccentric and concentric. So a really nice movement to start off with. There's not a lot that can go wrong here with the chest support. One of my favourites actually as well, for feeling a really good contraction, and a really nice and easy one to set up. The next exercise up is a cable seated row, which is obviously again is another horizontal movement. Now this one can be a little bit more difficult because there is more things that can go wrong. So first of all, we need to get into the position in a nice safe way. So basically what you can see here on the screen is me using my foot to drive backwards, keeping a nice straight back and getting into a solid position. We then brace our core, sit up nice and straight, and then you are able to have a slight rock. We don't want it to be too much because then we'll start really putting a bit of stress on our lower back, which is not the targeted muscles. As you can see, my grip, I am holding my thumbs on top. It essentially eradicates your forearms, because quite often when you're doing back exercise, if you're fully gripping on, you will be feeling it in your forearms after you've done the exercise. If you literally put your thumbs on top, it takes a bit of the forearm out and it puts a lot more emphasis on your back. So as you can see, nice and controlled on the eccentric and concentric. We don't want to just be flying forward and then having to stop the weight, because that's just going to put so much pressure on ourselves. Nice little rock, so maybe 10 to 15 degrees either way. Get that nice stretch in our lats and then pull back through. You can even throw a pause in there if you wanted to make it a little bit harder. Drop your weight, pause it at the back, and then slowly go through the motion. This exercise can be adjusted as well to target more of your upper back or your lower back, depending on where you pull through and what cable attachment that you use. This one we are just using a V-grip, nicely pulling in to our stomach. The third exercise we've got up is a seated plated row. Now this is one of my favourite pieces of kit in a gym for back. Some of them usually come with a neutral grip, which you can see in this video. Some of them also come with a pronator grip, which is our hands this way, pulling through. That grip I find can be a lot better for your upper back, but when it comes to seated plated rows, I like to go on neutral grip because I can go a little bit heavier. Again, you eradicate the thumbs by putting them over the ends of the grips. You can, again, like I said, depends on what part of your back you want to target. I tend to put my seat quite high so that I can target sort of my lower lats a little bit more. I feel a better contraction as well, I feel a bit more comfortable. Quite often in the gym, because I am quite tall, these pieces of kit aren't like sort of made for people beyond 6 foot. I'm 6'4", and most pieces of kit in the gym don't quite fit me that well, but I find if I go a little bit higher on this piece of kit, I get a nice range of motion. You can go all the way forward, stretch your lats, then reset your shoulders back and then pull through. I like to keep my shoulders back for the majority of the exercise, so I keep it under control and I don't have to reset. It is down to preference on that one. Because of the way they move, it is quite hard to get them wrong. They are on a fixed plane of motion. And before anyone says anything, those are 220s on either side, there's not just the one. I can go heavier, but I went nice and light for the video. They were really thin plates actually, really sharp on the edges. So we come on to our fourth exercise, which is another one of my favorites. It is a barbell row. You can obviously do this with dumbbells. I like to do it with a barbell. I like to go with a supinated grip, which is your palms facing sort of away from you. Now this is an exercise where things can go wrong. I see quite a lot of people in the gym getting this exercise wrong, mainly because they tend to stand too vertically and not bent over like the exercise suggests. It is a barbell bent over row, so you are meant to bend over. I see a lot of people sort of flapping around as well as they're pulling through. The weight's obviously too heavy and they sort of doing this sort of motion. I haven't got it on the clip, but obviously deadlift the weight up nice and safely, or you could even use a rack and then pull off straight away. So going into the exercise, feet around a shoulder width apart, hip width apart, nice and solid stance. And then as you can see, it is essentially like a RDL to get into the right position. You want to be getting as parallel to the floor as you possibly can, because this is going to give us the most purchase on our back muscles. The more we sort of stand up, we're going to start bringing in our rear delts. As you can see, we've got a nice solid stance, and we are again pulling through into our hips. We don't want to be pulling in too high, because then we're going to just be isolating our biceps, which is not the intended muscle for this exercise. Depending on how flexible your hamstrings are will depend how far you can bend over without having to bend your knees. Especially what I find, because I play football quite a lot, I get tight hamstrings. Sometimes I have to bend them a little bit further depending on how often I've done football recently. A slight bend in your knees, nice and bent over, as close to sort of 90 degrees as you can. Don't be beating yourself up if you can't get that far. Not many people can. Nice neutral spine as well. We don't want to be putting too much pressure on that lower back by bending the spine. But again, nice and controlled on the concentric and the eccentric. We don't want to just let the weight fall. Your muscles can actually hold more weight on an eccentric phase and a concentric phase. So an eccentric phase of this exercise is the weight going down towards the floor, and obviously the concentric phase is then pulling into your stomach. Slow it down, make it nice and controlled, and get more out of the exercise before pushing the weights up. Fifth exercise up is a fan favorite, obviously the lat pull down. We could not miss this one out. This one, we are going for a wide grip, which tends to be a little bit harder because the closer you sort of come in, say you're doing a pronated or supinated grip, you are going to use more bicep to pull it down, and you're going to sort of use less of your actual lats. Whereas the wider we go, the more purchase we can get on our lat muscles. You will find a lot of the times in the gym you'll see people sort of using momentum to get the weight back down. That is because the weight tends to be too heavy. They will be pulling and sort of leaning back and sort of bouncing back up. That is not how to do this exercise, or any exercise in the gym. You don't use momentum. So as you can see here, we've got a nice solid core to keep us in a nice solid position. As you can see, my head does bob back and forward just a tiny bit, and that's basically to get my head out of the way because it is a fat head. So what I'm doing here is, as I'm going up, I'm getting a nice big stretch on my back. So as I'm doing that, I sort of pull my head through and then pull it back out the way. Similar to when you're doing a overhead press. You obviously need to get your head out the way and then you push your head through at the end as you push the weight up. Similar on this exercise, just the opposite way around. So as we pull down, we retract our shoulder blades and we get a nice squeeze at the bottom. As we pull down, we're pulling into our upper chest area. Just a few more reps, and that is how to do a lat pull down, nice and safely. Again, like I said, there are multiple different grips that you can do. You could even use a V-bar on this. There are so many different attachments that you can use on cable exercises. Just find the one that you like the most, really. It does make a difference, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're doing enough variety, you will be targeting all of your back at some point. So our sixth and final exercise is a single arm row. Kind of similar to the first exercise, which was a chest supported row, but obviously this is a single arm exercise. Again, we need to get into a nice solid position. So you may want to drop the bench a little bit below 45 degrees to get a little bit more space. So as you can see, if you're going with your right arm, left hand at the top of the bench, knee on the bench where you'd usually put your bum if you were to sit on it, and then 1 foot on the floor. So 3 solid points of contact. Nice and strong position, nice neutral spine, and a braced core, which with most exercises you are going to need. So as you can see here, we've got the weight on the bench. We drop into our position. So as you can see, a nice horizontal arm. And then again, like every other exercise that we've been talking about, we're gonna pull that shoulder and weight up into our hip. And that's gonna get the most out of our lats. So as you can see, I sort of almost rotate a little bit at the bottom to get a little bit more stretch out my lat. Then you pull your shoulder back, reset it and pull through, and you can even do a little tiny twist. You don't want to be over exaggerating it because that'll be too much. But if you rotate a tiny little bit, you get that extra little squeeze. Again, nice and controlled on the eccentric, because we can get more out of the exercise by slowing that down. So as you can see, we're pulling through at a right angle at the top of the exercise. Arm is nice and straight, weight is still pointing down, forearm is still horizontal to the ground, and we are pulling that weight into our back pocket. And then obviously, to do your left arm, swap your knee that's on the bench and put your other foot on the floor and put your right hand at the top of the bench. Now those are the 6 back exercises that I think you should be doing to see some actual back gains in the gym. So this content was a little bit different for me. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like below. If there's any similar videos that you'd like me to do, make sure you put them in the comments, and if you're new, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.